All right, folks. So glad that you're able to join us on this recording right now because, man, if you are like me, you're probably inundated with all kinds of what we think is nonsensical acronyms these days and deadlines. And a lot of us entrepreneurs have got all other kinds of deadlines. And so we kind of just start kicking the can down the road when we hear that there's some new legislation or some kind of mandate that's coming down the road to hit us entrepreneurs. And depending on the state that you're in, it gets a little bit overwhelming sometimes. And so the latest acronym that's been buzzing around is GDPR. So what the heck is GDPR and why am I supposed to be all stressed out this week with this looming deadline at the end of the week, May 25th? So because I'm not the sharpest tack in the tool, see, I can't even do the sharpest tack in the box or sharpest, whatever, you guys get it. I surround myself with people who are a whole lot bolder and brighter than I am. And anyone who's worked with me can tell you, I do great things because I have great people around me. So what I wanted to do is introduce you folks to a great friend of mine and one of the most brilliant attorneys, entrepreneurs, who happens to be a woman that I know, and that's Jessica Eves Matthews. Jessica and I have known each other for a long time. We've done all kinds of work together. We've spoken on the same stage. I've heard her speak. She's happens to be an attorney, but also just a rock star entrepreneur and innovator. And so she's able to use both sides of the brain here. And she gets the pain that we go through as business owners and entrepreneurs. And because of her brilliance and her common sense, she's able to boil things down into bite-sized nuggets and talk to me in layman's terms, which I need sometimes. So I'm not just saying that she's brilliant because she's my friend. Listen, a lot of people recognize her. And so she's been practicing law. Jessica, I don't know if you want me to say this or not.
It's fine, go for it.
5 years. And some of her clients, I mean, she was the chief litigator and helped with compliance with some of the billionaires around the world that you would turn on the TV and see, like people like Paul Allen, the co-founder of Microsoft, and a whole lot of other folks. And I've turned to her for legal help and counsel several times over the last few years. And it's been a joy working with her because, like I said, she takes these complex issues and is able to boil them down. And this GDPR thing that is pending right now is one of those complex issues that no matter who you talk to has got a different opinion. And in fact, just in the last week when it really kind of got on my radar and I stopped kicking the can down the road with my hotel company and said, oh my gosh, I've got these compliance deadlines and actually threats of not just litigation, but fines, like real fines. I thought, man, I need to get serious about this. And so Jessica and I have been talking for the last few days. She's done a lot of research on this. In fact, I'm in a mastermind right now. I've got clients three floors above me in our boardroom up there. And these are some rock star entrepreneurs and business owners. And I asked them, hey, how you guys doing on the GDPR thing? And I got like the 1,000-mile stare. Like, what the heck are you talking about with the GDPR thing? And so I know that people are in my coaching program, and we're kind of on the cutting edge of performance and compliance and just innovation. There's got to be a whole lot of other people out there, probably you, who is as frustrated or ignorant about this stuff as I am. And so I wanted to bring Jessica on to kind of help me answer some questions about this. So folks, I want you to meet my dear friend, Jessica Eves Matthews. Jessica, I see that you're in your luxurious office down there in San Diego County. Thanks for joining me on this call.
I had to have the most beautiful setting for this video. So, oh God!
Well, but I'm for joining me.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
All right, so let's start with the basic question. We tried doing a live stream earlier today, and it didn't go well. And right out of the gate, people are asking, "What the heck is GDPR?" Can we start with that thing first?
Yeah, let's start with that. And let me actually, because I'm a lawyer, I have to start with something else, which is I have to put the disclaimer in that Larry and I, are not intending to give anybody legal advice.
Yeah.
And what we're giving today is information and hopefully some educational information so that you can take further action. But nothing takes the place of consulting with a lawyer because Larry and I don't know about your specific situation.
Right.
So we can't advise you about what's best for your business. So basically, we're going to give you sort of the quick and dirty version of GDPR compliance today, but it's on you to go do what you need to do to get in compliance. So there's no legal relationship formed and no legal advice being given. So
Thank
with,
you.
yes, you're welcome. So with that, GDPR is the European Union, or the EU for short. It's the General Data Protection Regulation. And it's coming into effect on Friday, May 25th. But don't panic. We are going to show you how to get in compliance very quickly. It is possible to do. But it is basically a regulation that governs the collection and processing of personal data of EU citizens. I mean, that's really sort of the point behind it. And it's meant to provide more transparency and control over how EU citizens' personal data and personally identifying information is collected, stored, and used. So that's really the point behind it. It's a data protection regulation for citizens of the European Union.
Yeah. So like here in the US, we have this PCI compliance. If you do business doing transactions, you're collecting any data or credit card information from people, it's kind of this version of it. But so what activities are actually regulated by this GDPR thing?
Yeah, so the GDPR talks about processing data or collecting data and controlling data, but processing is really what we're talking about today. And processing is really just sort of a legal term to include the collection of, the storage of, or the use of personal information. So for example, that would include if you have an opt-in box on your website, you're collecting personal data. If you hold that information in your Infusionsoft account or Entreport or MailChimp or some other CRM system, holding that information is storing it. And then if you send emails to that email address or to that person, you're using it. And any of those activities they fall within the definition of processing. So even just the act of having it in your database puts you under the definition of processing for the purposes of this regulation.
And if we have a website, we don't know who's coming to the website.
Exactly.
You put a sign on your website that says no people from Europe.
Right. Unless you have found out how to do geo-blocking with your website, which I don't know how to do. Yeah. The likelihood is that there's always a chance that someone from the EU could come upon your website and visit it. And we all know that websites do their own automatic collection of information through cookies. Yeah. And if you're using Facebook advertising or Facebook pixels or Google Analytics or retargeted marketing campaigns, any of those things involve an automatic mining of personal data, including things like your IP address, the type of computer you're using, and your physical location somewhere in the world. And so that is personally identifiable information, and therefore that is governed by the GDPR.
All right, so if GDPR is for people in Europe, the EU, how does it apply to us if we're here in the States?
Well, you really hit on it. It's because anywhere that EU citizens go, this regulation is going to reach. And so unless you have like a super local business, like a restaurant that no one would ever go to the website unless they were in your town and they were trying to order online for delivery or something, that's the only kind of website I can think of where GDPR would not apply. But for the rest of us, if we've got a business where we're trying to get the word out, where we've got blogs or podcasts or videos, if we sell products or services, including digital products, or coaching programs, or if we have membership sites or anything like that, and it's open for anybody to join, because obviously it is if you're not geo-blocking people, which again, I don't know how to do, there's always a possibility that someone from the EU could visit your site or could even buy from you, could fill out an opt-in form to get more information. And so the point is that if there's a chance that a person from the EU could come to your site and give you personally identifiable information, either voluntarily or through the automation process with pixels or cookies, then you have to be in compliance with GDPR.
Yeah. So those are really the practical applications of this thing, right? So opt-in, somebody just doing an internet search, right? So what does compliance actually look like for a business owner, like you or me?
Right. So first of all, it's important to understand that this is a really big regulation. It's over 200 pages of text. And so there's a lot of complexities, and we don't have time to get into that today. And honestly, I don't want to overwhelm people, because right now you've got some work to do this week to get in compliance before Friday. And I want everybody to keep their eye on the ball and do what they have to do to get in compliance. So I don't mean to oversimplify what compliance is, but for purposes of getting the things you need to get done by Friday, that's what we're going to talk about today. So, so your job right now, so basically you have to have, under the GDPR, you have to have what's called a legal basis for processing information. And again, remember, processing includes collecting, storing, or using. So you have to have a lawful basis, and the GDPR only provides 6 lawful bases that they outline in the regulation, which if people want to know that information, we're going to share with them a link later, and they can get that information all they want from me later on. But those 6 bases are the only bases you have for processing information of citizens of the EU. And if you don't fit within those 6, then you can't do it. So your job right now, everybody's job listening, is to determine what your lawful basis is to collect, store, or process, or use personally identifying information from people in the EU. And so what that means is you got to find a lawful basis for any data you currently have. There's basically two issues. You've got the data you currently have. So if you have had people visit your site and cookies have been deposited, and you've got that automatically collected information from members of the EU, which is kind of hard to determine whether you have that or not. Or if they have come to your website and actually opted into your email list or purchased something from you, then you have an existing database of information about EU citizens. Now, the one you have real control over is your email list. So we've got to deal with that list and make sure that you have a lawful basis to continue to hold that list. Then we need to talk about collection of information going forward, because the old version of opting in doesn't work anymore.
You guys catch that? The old version of opting in doesn't work anymore. You collecting that information,
right?
You need to beware. Okay, go
and
ahead.
This is why the deadline is so important, because basically the GDPR has a heightened level of consent, which means that you have to jump through more hoops in order to be authorized to gather people's personally identifying information. So no longer can you put in an opt-in box on your website or on a landing page that just says name, address. You may say something like, we never share your information with third parties. You might have a link to your privacy policy, might not. Sometimes you'll have a checkbox that says, yes, sign me up for your newsletter and your offers or whatever. But that checkbox is actually defaulted to being checked, so the person has to uncheck it. None of those things are acceptable anymore under the GDPR. So now this only applies to EU citizens, but the problem is that you can't have like a separate website for EU citizens. So you've got to do this across the board for everyone. So all of your opt-in boxes are going to have to be revised. And when it comes, so basically the thing we need to talk about is, first of all, let's go back to talk about the lawful basis really quickly, because there are several grounds that you could have a lawful basis for holding, collecting and holding information. Then let's talk about how you get that consent going forward. And it needs to happen by Friday. So the reason the deadline matters is because if you haven't done the things we're going to talk about right now, then as of Friday, you no longer have consent, because the consent you got before doesn't rise to the legal standard that's required now. So therefore, it's as if they never gave you consent. So if you have people on your list right now that are from the EU, you're basically going to have to delete them from your database on Friday, which may not be a big deal if you only have 3 or 4 people. But a lot of us are marketing, coaching services all over the world. And your business, Larry, obviously has a broad scope in the hotel industry. And so if you've got a lot of people, including, customers, people who have actually purchased from you, then you've got to find a way to get consent from them that that is heightened consent under the GDPR in order to maintain their contact info and their personally identifiable information. You can't even maintain it for statistical purposes under the Act without this heightened consent. So it's twofold. And there are 2 grounds, 2 lawful bases really that you could choose for most of us. There's 6 that are outlined in the regulation, but there are really only 2 that matter for our purposes today. The first one is consent. And that is when somebody voluntarily gives you consent to communicate with them, or they voluntarily give you information like in a shopping cart when they're buying from you, or they take a quiz or an assessment on your website, or they fill out a form or an application for a coaching program, or something like that. So that information is voluntarily given. And so that consent has to be more specific. And we'll talk in a second about exactly what it has to include and how you have to revise your opt-in box so that it, so that it satisfies this heightened standard. The other way that you could have authorization to collect, store, and use personally identifiable information is through contract. So if you have a contractual relationship with someone, it's implicit in that they've given you permission to communicate with them. So for example, as a lawyer, if I had a client in the EU and they asked me for a proposal for my legal services, even though we don't even have a contract signed yet, implicit in that is that I have the right to actually use their contact information and the information they've given me about who they are in their business to make the proposal for them and then send it to them. And then once we have the signed engagement agreement, which is a contract, then I have authorization under the GDPR to communicate with them in ways that are necessary and reasonable to fulfill the contract. So I can't take, like if I have somebody who hires me to do legal work, that doesn't mean that I can then take their information and add it to my general marketing email list.
Right.
So I have to ask them if they want to be added. And if they don't affirmatively say, yes, I want to be added, you cannot add them. And if you do, you're in violation. Here's the problem. If you don't do this, and if you continue to operate out of compliance, so say you kind of keep your old opt-in boxes and you continue to collect information the old way, somebody on your list is probably going to complain about you. Yeah. And because members of the EU are very aware of this new regulation.
Oh, yeah.
And people are not happy these days with the misuse of their personally identifiable information. And so it's not like the ICO, which is the enforcing body, is going to, be roaming the planet starting on Friday with teams of, data police shutting everybody down. That's not what's going to happen. What's going to happen is people are going to start reporting you to the ICO that you're in violation of the GDPR. And the problem with that is that there are massive fines that are possible if you violate the GDPR. Now, if the maximum fine is 200 million euros or 4% of your gross revenue from the previous fiscal year.
Isn't that crazy?
It's a lot of money.
Those are some big numbers. I mean, a lot of businesses, that 4% is the difference between profitability or bankruptcy.
Yeah, right? That's their profit margin.
Now, you and I were both in Europe recently, and I could tell you, I was hearing citizens talking about this because they are so, frankly, pissed off about the misuse of being scammed and sent all kinds of right?
Well, and with respect to like Brexit, for example, and even our election, we now know that Cambridge Analytica was working with, individuals that were scraping information off of apps. There were apps that were integrated with Facebook that were overreaching and collecting data about us and our friends and family that we didn't even know was being collected. Right. And, now we're hearing that some of that information has actually made its way to Russia, maybe. I mean, people are not happy about this, right? And so this is the EU's response, because Brexit, happened long before our election. I mean, the year before or the summer before. And so, this regulation has been a long time coming in the EU. We're going to follow suit at some point. Other countries will as well. So this heightened level of transparency, communication, and giving individuals more control over who has access to their information, who can store it, who can use it, is in everybody's best interest. And honestly, it's going to help you in business. It's going to help your reputation. It's going to help your relationships. I agree. And if you are violating the terms, you're just going to piss people off and you're going to lose business. So there's no point in complaining about it if people are frustrated that, this is happening. It's going to be the
got to
way it
do
is
it
going forward. You got to do
it. The complaining is not going to do anything about it.
Right.
The best thing we can do is to get in compliance. Let me ask you a quick question, and we're going to have to kind of wrap up here in a couple minutes here.
Yeah.
But does this apply to citizens of the EU or residents of the EU?
Residents of the EU.
All right. So it's residents.
I think there is some debate about this, but people who are physically located in the EU who access your website are technically in the EU when they do access your website. So I think it really is meant to protect EU citizens.
Yes, however, what I've heard, and I'm pretty sure this is the case, so think about, you may be saying, well, I don't have anybody from the EU, but how about service members, military service members,
who are
really constantly doing searches on websites over here?
That's right. Yeah, and this is the thing, is we don't know how it's going to be enforced yet.
Right.
And so you just want to I just want to strip this down to the easiest possible way for everybody listening to get in compliance by Friday. It is possible. And I want you guys to understand the risk of not doing it, because, the fines are huge, but and this is the other thing to understand about the fines. Yes, you're probably not like an Amazon who, I think made 178 billion in gross revenue last year. So their fine would be like 7.1 billion. Right. Per violation. Okay, so this is the thing to understand. Every email is a violation. It isn't just the act of sending out an email blast to your list. That's not one violation. That's multiple violations. So it can add up very quickly, even for a small business. Even if it's not like $1 million fine, you could have a multi-thousand to $100,000 fine that you're dealing with. And so you do not want to mess around with this.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just cut to the chase, because I know we don't have a ton of time. Yeah. I have created, just so people know, I've created a GDPR compliance packet. Frankly, because when I started doing this for myself, I was like you, I kind of put it off. I'm a lawyer, so I'm like, whatever, I can get it done at the last minute.
I'm a lawyer.
And I started digging into it. I started paying for some paid training, and I was like, oh God, this is a big deal. And I feel like a bad person for not having told my list about it before now. Yeah. And so this is my way of doing penance for that. And so I've created a packet that is going to make it super easy. It's really inexpensive for what you get. It's going to give you templates. It's going to give you a checklist. It's going to walk you through. It's got audio instructions on exactly how to do this. You're going to need a couple of hours between now and Friday.
Yeah.
And then there's a private Facebook group that you can join once you've gotten the packet. And because this is like an evolving body of law. So there's going to be changes. There's going to be updates. And so that's the way to stay updated and make sure that you are staying in compliance. Because that's the other thing about this. This is not like a set it and forget it kind of thing. The intent behind the regulation is that everybody stays more actively involved in how they're gaining consent, how they're maintaining the security of that information. Often we're going to have to go back and sort of refresh consent. Consent can even be considered to have expired over time. And that's all not really clear yet as far as how that's going to be interpreted or enforced. So staying up on the law is going to be really important going forward. But here's what you need to do. Should we just cut to the chase? Consent, the gist of it is that most of us are going to have consent as the basis for collecting information, right? You may have a contract, and that's awesome if you do, but the contract is limited because you can't add someone that you have a contract with to your general marketing email list. So you want to get people on your general marketing email list, or you're kind of dead in the water. It doesn't mean anything to have an email list anymore if you can't use it. So let's talk about consent. It needs to be freely given. It needs to be genuine and affirmatively given. And people need to have the ability to opt out readily and easily, which hopefully we've all been providing that already, but that has to be there. One thing that's really important, and I mentioned, is the pre-ticked box, the pre-checked box on the opt-in box is no longer allowed. So if you have a box, and I do recommend with your opt-in box that you do have a checkbox, but you have to leave it unchecked. And that way people can affirmatively check the box. If they don't, so say, for example, you're giving a free report or a free webinar in an attempt to get somebody on your email list. They can sign up for the free webinar. They can not check the box, and you have to give them the freebie, and you cannot add them to your marketing email list. So this part of this is going to come down to getting creative about convincing people why they want to be on your marketing email list. What are the perks? So this is really going to be a marketing thing and a sales job, basically, to convince people why there's value in being on that list. But you can't bundle them together anymore. So you're going to have to rethink. And again, in my compliance package, I give a lot more detail on how to do that. But you need to revise your opt-in boxes wherever they are. You got to fix that. And you also need to revise privacy policy. Everyone has to have it. It has to be GDPR compliant. And you have to have a link to that in the opt-in box. Absolutely have to have it now. So people can go read that. So those are the things you need. You need to have a revised opt-in box, and you need to have a privacy policy. But for the people that are existing on your list, first of all, the thing I would recommend is find out first, you got to know if you've got valid consent. And if you don't have valid consent by Friday, the problem is that processing, as I mentioned, includes collecting, storing, and using. So you can't even store people's information starting on Friday if you don't have valid consent.
You guys get that? This is
it's huge.
Mind-boggling.
So what you need to do is you need to engage in an email campaign this week. And I honestly, to me, like, especially if you've got a number of people from the EU on your email list, this warrants clearing your calendar a little bit to really focus on this.
Well, I don't want to overwhelm people with this. I mean, it's serious stuff, but if you're like me, if this is outside your strength, have somebody on your team do this. Like I've got a CFO, I've got an IT guy, and I've got an assistant. This is what they've been doing.
Right. Exactly. So, and that way they can send out the emails. They can do all of that behind the scenes.
Right.
But someone needs to be working your list this week to try to get people to re-up and give you consent again. Yeah. So what you can do is you can go into your email provider like MailChimp or Entreport or Infusionsoft, and most of them, because they are aware of this, they've been working on GDPR compliance. They're working on putting functionality into their systems that gives you the ability to segment your list based on geographic location. Right. So for most of them, you should be able to go in now. Like I have Entreport. It was very easy for me to go in and search based on who's in EU countries and create a sublist. And so for the sublist, and this is only for EU emails. Okay. So you don't have to do this for people on your list who are in the US or other countries, but for the people that are on your list that are in the EU, that's what comes up as their country. You need to send them some re-engagement emails this week to tell them about what's happening and to ask them to recommit and, reconsent. And that's where the marketing language comes in. You're going to have to get creative about convincing them why they should, because the reality is most people don't even open their emails. So you're going to have to get creative with your subject lines. You're going to have to get playful and funny, maybe do some funny videos, do some stuff on social media. But try to get that consent reaffirmed before Friday so you can keep communicating with them. Yeah. Going forward with the opt-in box, the challenge is you're also going to have to get creative about how to get them to consent to being on your email list, even if they sign up for a freebie. So it may be that you, in the email where you deliver the free data, digital product, for example, you would include some language in there saying, and by the way, you should sign up for my email list because this is all the great stuff you get. So you got to think about how you're going to get people to consent to being on your mailing list going forward. Yeah. But that's like the quick and dirty version of what you need to do. Yeah. If you don't get consent from people, you need to delete them from your list on Friday.
Yeah. So the reality is our friend, right? So we can think about this all day long and get overwhelmed by it. But what I love about what you're doing here with this GDPR compliance packet, folks, what Jess has done, she's done this work for us. All right, because it's overwhelming enough to think you got to do it, and then to sit down and think, okay, now I got to craft this email, make sure it's compliant, run it by my attorney, all that kind of stuff. So Jess has done this for us, and I'm telling you, get the darn stuff done.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I'm begging you. I don't want to see anybody get reported to the ICO and end up having to pay fines.
I just know, having been in Europe just a couple of weeks ago, there are people chomping at the bit. Because this has been around for a while, but it's the actual enforcement that's about to actually take place. Is that right, Jess?
That's exactly right. Yeah. And the thing is that ignorance is not an excuse. So even though most of us here in the U.S. didn't understand because we just weren't paying attention, That is not going to be a defense if somebody comes after you. And so the best thing you can do right now is take the steps necessary to get in compliance and then document it so that you can show if somebody challenges you that you did make a good faith effort to get in compliance.
Right.
That's the most important thing to do.
Yeah.
And then we can take it from there. Then join the private Facebook group. We'll have an ongoing conversation. But the most important thing is to get these, minimally compliant tasks done this week, so that you can move forward and be in compliance.
Yeah, so we're going to have to wrap. So let me tell you folks what we need to do here. In the description for this video, no matter where you find it, this is going to be on my social media pages, on my website. There's a link in this description on how to work with Jess on this GDPR compliance packet. I'm telling you, it's an amazing value. I'm putting my reputation on the line associating with Jessica. I trust her with all of this stuff. All right. I trust her with my life and my kids. I'll tell you that. And this is really important. Okay. So if you trust me, trust Jessica, sign up for this thing, get involved. That will give you access to this private Facebook group as well. Jess and I, most likely, knowing the way we work, will be getting together here in a week or two to do a follow-up.
Yeah, for sure.
This is step number one, folks.
Yeah.
Rip the Band-Aid off this week. Find some folks on your team who can spend a couple of hours on this. And frankly, although it would take Jessica and I a couple of hours, because this is not, it would take me at least several hours, because this is not my skill set.
Yeah.
If you find somebody on your team where this is their strengths, this kind of detail stuff, they'll probably get it done quicker.
Yeah.
You will even trying to do this.
Exactly.
Any kind of parting shots here, Jess?
Oh, I just want to thank you for putting your faith in me. You have no idea how much it means. And, the feeling is very mutual as far as you're an amazing, amazing person and human being and businessman. So I really don't take it lightly that you're putting your faith in me on this. And I just want to encourage people to take care of themselves. I mean, that's my passion, is educating entrepreneurs and how to protect themselves. That's why I've been doing it for years. And this one is too important to ignore. So I really hope people will take it seriously. Yeah,
seriously, this could be, and I'm not one who throws around, this stuff very easily. This could break you. If you get caught up in this thing, this could close your business down.
Right.
All right. And it doesn't need to. It's, it's simple thing, not simple, but anyway. you can fix it pretty quickly if you just do some of these minimum compliant things that Jeff helped us out with. And I can tell you this, just from the conversation I've had in the last couple of weeks with business owners, there are a lot of people who are overwhelmed by it. How people get overwhelmed oftentimes. They stick their head in the sand and don't deal with it at all.
That's right.
So she's taking the pain out of this by doing it for you.
Yeah. Right? So that's the goal.
All right, good. All right, Jess, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I know this is going to be value, and it's going to be life-saving and business-saving for some people. So, folks, thanks for getting on here. The link for Jess's GDPR compliance packet is in the description here. I'm begging you, follow it. Trust me. If you trust me, trust Jess on this, because it's going to really take some pain out of your life. All right? Jess, thanks for doing this.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Larry.
We'll
talk soon.
I'll see you. Bye.
Bye.